There is a kind of sadness that does not announce itself. It doesn't arrive with tears or collapse. It doesn't demand attention or ask for help. It simply settles. Quietly, the way snow settles on a windowsill in the middle of the night when no one is watching. You might feel it on a Sunday afternoon when the light changes and the house grows still. Or you might feel it at the end of a perfectly ordinary day. A day in which nothing went wrong, and yet something inside you feels hollow. Not broken, not desperate, just quietly, persistently hollow. Many people live with this, more than you might expect. They go to work, they cook dinner, they answer messages, laugh at the right moments, ask their children how school was. And somewhere beneath all of that, beneath the routines and the small talk and the careful management of ordinary life, there is a sadness they have never quite named. A weight they have learned to carry so naturally that they almost forget it is there. Almost. This is not about depression, though it can live close to it. This is about something quieter, something more human. The kind of sadness that comes not from catastrophe, but from the slow, gentle passage of time. From things left unsaid, from connections that faded before anyone chose to let them go. From mornings when you wake up and realize, with a dull and familiar ache, that life has somehow already become what it is, and you are not entirely sure how you feel about that. If you recognize this, even a little, then this is for you. There is a woman named Astrid. She lives in a quiet town in the north where winter arrives early and stays long. She has a good life, a real one, with things in it worth being grateful for. A daughter who calls every Sunday, a small apartment with a kitchen window that looks out over birch trees, a job she has done for 23 years, which she is reasonably good at and which pays her enough. By any reasonable measure, there is nothing wrong. And yet, when Astrid wakes up at 4 in the morning, which she does more often than she would like to admit, she lies in the dark and feels something she cannot fully describe. It is not fear. It is not grief. Not exactly. It is more like a kind of emotional tiredness that sleep does not cure. A sense that she has been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and that she is no longer sure what it is she is even carrying. She has never spoken about this to anyone. Not because she is private. She isn't, particularly, not because she lacks the words. She is quite articulate, actually, when the conversation calls for it. It's more that she wouldn't know where to begin. The feeling doesn't have a story attached to it. There is no event, no single wound, no clear before and after she could point to and say, there, that is where this started. It just is. It has always, in some form, just been. Astrid was married for 18 years to a man named Eric. They were not unhappy. That is important to say. There was warmth in that marriage. real warmth, especially in the early years. Laughter in the kitchen, arguments that resolved themselves, a daughter they both loved completely, a life built piece by piece out of ordinary things. But somewhere in the middle of it, she couldn't say exactly when. They had become more like furniture to each other than people. They were kind. They were considerate. They simply stopped being present in the way that used to make the other person feel seen. The divorce, when it came, was almost politely arrived at. No anger, no betrayal. Just two people sitting across from each other at a kitchen table, speaking in careful voices, agreeing that this had become something neither of them had intended, and that perhaps it was better to stop here. Astrid has thought many times about why that was sadder than if there had been real anger. She thinks it is because at least anger means something still burns. At least anger is alive. What they had by the end was something that had gone gently, quietly cold. She does not miss Eric, not exactly. She misses the person she was when she was young enough to believe that love, once found, simply stayed. She misses the particular kind of hope that belongs to that age. The hope that hasn't yet learned to protect itself. Most people imagine loneliness as an empty room. A person sitting alone staring at a wall. No phone calls, no knocks at the door. The obvious image of isolation. But real loneliness, the kind that lives inside ordinary life, looks nothing like that. It looks like a full calendar and an empty feeling. It looks like a dinner table with people around it and a conversation that never quite touches anything real. It looks like being surrounded at work, at family gatherings, at the school reunion, and feeling somehow as though you are watching everything from a slight distance. As though there is a thin sheet of glass between you and everything else. Astrid has that feeling sometimes, not always, not even most of the time, but enough. It comes when her daughter visits and they talk about practical things, work, weather, plans, and Astrid feels the conversation skimming the surface of something deeper that neither of them knows how to reach. It comes at work, where she is liked and respected, but where she has slowly, over the years, become more of a role than a person. It comes most often in the evenings. After 9 o'clock, when the apartment settles into its nighttime silence, and Astrid makes tea and sits by the window and watches the birch trees, which in winter are pale and skeletal against the dark sky. She doesn't feel sorry for herself exactly. Self-pity is too sharp an emotion for what she feels. It is more like a quiet awareness, the awareness of a life that has become somehow narrower than she once imagined it would be. Not small, not wasted, just narrower. And she wonders on those evenings whether anyone else is sitting somewhere in a quiet apartment in a town where it snows early, feeling something very similar. She suspects the answer is yes. She suspects the answer is more people than you could count. There is a particular kind of relationship between friends, between siblings, between people who were once very close, that slowly, without either party quite deciding to let it happen, becomes something formal. You stop calling just to talk. You start only calling when there is news. You see each other at birthdays, at funerals, at the occasional gathering, and you are warm to each other. You hug. You say we should do this more often, and you mean it at the time. And then life fills back in, and the days pass, and you don't. Astrid had a friend named Marta from university. For many years, they were the kind of friends who could call at midnight and say nothing for a while, and it would still feel like company. They talked about everything, about their marriages, their fears, their secret suspicions about who they actually were underneath all the versions of themselves they showed to the world. And then, very slowly, over the course of many years, they drifted. No argument, no betrayal, just the slow gravitational pull of separate lives, different cities, different routines, the endless busyness that modern life uses to fill the spaces that used to belong to depth. Astrid still thinks about Marta. She thinks about her, especially when something happens. Something small, something that would have made Marta laugh in exactly the right way, or something that would have made her say, in her quiet, precise voice, "Yes, I understand exactly what you mean." She has thought about calling. She has thought about it many times. But there is a particular inertia that builds up over years of not calling. The silence accumulates its own weight, and at some point, breaking it feels almost like an intrusion, like knocking on the door of a house you once lived in, where someone else now lives. So she doesn't call, and the friendship lives, preserved but unused, somewhere in the middle distance between past and present. This is one of the quieter forms of loss. Not the death of something exactly, more like a slow, painless fading, like a photograph left too long in the light. The image is still there. You can still make out the shapes, but the color has gone. Astrid is not, by nature, a philosophical person. She doesn't read philosophy books or think in abstract terms, but she has spent enough years inside her own quiet interior life that she has arrived, slowly and without quite meaning to, at certain understandings. One of them is this: sadness is not always a problem to be solved. Sometimes it is simply what honesty feels like when you are paying close enough attention to your own life. She has noticed that people spend an enormous amount of energy trying to not feel what they actually feel, filling the silence with noise, filling the evenings with screens, filling the weekend with plans, so that the Sunday afternoon doesn't get too quiet, doesn't give the hollow feeling time to arrive. She understands the impulse. She has done it herself for years, still does sometimes. But she has also learned, or is in the process of learning, that the hollow feeling, if you let it be there without fighting it, doesn't actually swallow you. It just sits with you for a while. And after a while, it passes. Or it doesn't pass. It just becomes more familiar, less frightening. There is something in that. Not comfort exactly, more like a kind of honesty. A willingness to be in your life as it actually is, rather than as you wish it were or fear it might be. She thinks this is what some people mean when they talk about peace. Not happiness, not the absence of sadness. Just a willingness to be present with what is real, with the winter light and the birch trees, and the tea that is slowly cooling, and the quiet that is both lonely and, in some way, she can't fully articulate, hers. The neighbor downstairs, a man named Saven, retired, who Astrid sees most mornings when she checks the post, has a particular way of standing that she has noticed over the years. He stands very still, not relaxed still. Still in the way of a person who has learned not to move, because movement might disturb something that is in a careful balance. She doesn't know his story. They have exchanged pleasantries for 8 years without ever exchanging anything real. But she recognizes something in the way he stands that she recognizes in herself. That careful stillness, that managed quietness. She wonders what he carries. She wonders this about many people now that she has gotten older and started to pay attention to the space around words rather than just the words themselves. The colleague who laughs too quickly and too loudly at meetings, covering something. The woman on the bus who stares out the window with an expression that is not quite sadness and not quite peace, but somewhere in between. The old man at the bakery on Saturday mornings who always orders the same thing and lingers a few minutes longer than necessary before leaving. All of them carrying something. All of them living their lives around a weight that no one else can quite see. This is not cause for despair. It is, Astrid has decided, cause for something much gentler. A kind of recognition, an awareness that the surface of things and the reality of things are almost never quite the same, and that most people you meet are doing the best they can with the invisible weight they carry. It makes her want to be kinder, not in a demonstrative way, just quietly in small moments, the kind of kindness that doesn't call attention to itself, the kind that simply makes the other person feel, for a moment, a little less alone. It is late now. The birch trees outside the window are barely visible against the dark. The tea has gone cold. Somewhere down the street, a car passes slowly. Its headlights moving across the ceiling for a moment before it is gone. Astrid sits in her chair and lets the silence be what it is. She is not happy tonight, not unhappy either. She is something more complicated than either of those words can hold. Something that has to do with being alive and being 53 and being a person who has loved and lost and carried things and kept going anyway, the way people do. There is a word in several Nordic languages for a kind of melancholy that is not purely sad. A bittersweet feeling, a sweet ache, the kind of emotion that comes from being aware, all at once, of both the beauty and the transience of things. She doesn't know if she has a word for what she feels, but she feels it. And that, she has decided, is enough. Not a conclusion, not a resolution, just an acceptance that this is what a human life feels like from the inside. Not clean, not simple, not the way stories make it sound, but real. Genuinely, stubbornly, quietly real. If you have been sitting with this and something in it felt familiar, then perhaps you already know that you are not alone in this. Not because life is easy, or because everything works out, or because sadness has a cure, but because this particular kind of quiet weight, the invisible kind, the kind that doesn't have a name or a story, the kind that simply settles into ordinary life and stays, is not unique to you. It is, in fact, one of the most common things in the world. And there is something in that, not comfort exactly, but a kind of company. The knowledge that somewhere, right now, other people are sitting in quiet apartments, watching the night come in through the window, feeling something they can't quite name, not drowning in it, not performing happiness over it, just sitting with it, letting it be there. That is not a small thing. In its own way, that is a kind of courage, the kind that no one ever sees.